Best conference in college football. Is it as obvious as it appears? Let's check out the numbers and the results on the field because that's what counts or should count. Welcome to the Voice of College Football. Please like the video. Before you do anything else, please like the video, even if you don't agree with me. If you enjoy the conversation here, discussion, debate, and analysis right here at the Voice of College Football, please subscribe. Hit that bell for the notifications. Share these videos out on social media because if you enjoy the conversation, others will as well. So bring them on in. We've got live streams, call-in shows throughout the week, content uploaded every day on 24 team channels, and most of the schools behind me, we have a team channel for them. All right, let's run it down. Also, man, Patreon. Join us on Patreon. I'm on a pretty good run here. Let's see, 42-28 against the spread. You also get selections from 20 media members, some of your favorites that appear on a regular basis here at the Voice of College Football. We've got their predictions every week, a 12-pack from them, and I predict all the top 25 games, and 57-17, 57-15 against the money line. I had 3 upset picks this week. They all hit. All right, let's get to it. Pac-12, fortunately for the Pac-12, they were able to win the 2 most important non-conference games because otherwise it has been an abysmal year by the Pac-12. This is pathetic. 5-5 in week 3. And consider when you hear 16-16 out of conference, that sounds like, okay, well, that's mediocre. No, that's awful because most of the wins are against FCS and Group of 5. A Power 5 league should win 65% of its games outside of the conference because they should win over 90%, 85 to 90% against a Group of 5 in the FCS. That's the history of the better conferences, and the Pac-12 just not getting it done. But again, Oregon may be able to trump it all by making the college football playoffs. We shall see. 5-5 in week 3. Now 16-16. So Utah lost to San Diego State in overtime this week. UCLA with a big upset loss at the Rose Bowl against Fresno State, 40-37. Arizona State lost to BYU. BYU, you might as well hand them the Pac-12 South Division Championship. BYU's 3-0 against the South, defeating Arizona State. And in a sense, the most embarrassing, but when you really consider the team involved, not the most embarrassing. Arizona's now lost 15 consecutive games, but they lost to Northern Arizona, an FCS team, this past weekend. And Northern Arizona, the Lumberjacks, they acted like they had just won the Super Bowl. Stormed the field. They were 0-2 in the FCS, and they beat Arizona. That's how bad Arizona is right now, and the Pac-12 in general. But again, Oregon, with a win against Stony Brook this past weekend, the Ohio State win, it's all on Oregon right now for the Pac-12. And in terms of a playoff bid, pretty much, of course, UCLA with a big loss against Fresno State. So not a whole lot of games for the Pac-12 to make up for 3-9 against the other Power 5 leagues and BYU. They do have USC and Stanford taking on Notre Dame coming up, and they did get a win. Yay. Stanford beat Vandy this past weekend. All right, so that's what it is for the Pac-12. Now let's look at the Big 12. The Big 12 had a nice week, 8-0 in week 3. So Baylor and Kansas played each other. Everybody else played outside of conference. No really enormous wins, but at the same time, West Virginia defeating Virginia Tech, that's a nice win for the conference. So you take on a mid to higher tier ACC team, and if you're West Virginia, you win that game 27-21. Nice win for the Big 12 there. The other big non-conference win, very much expected. Oklahoma, 22-point favorite over Nebraska. One of the worst teams thus far this season in the Big Ten, taking on the king of the Big 12, so they should win that game. And if anything, that's a check mark for the Big Ten because Nebraska hung in there 23-16. Upcoming, we've got TCU taking on SMU. The Horned Frogs are 2-0. We got Baylor and BYU mid-October, and we've got Kansas taking on Duke. And, of course, Kansas is just flat-out awful. But the Big 12 is 24-4 outside the conference. So they're holding serve. They're 4-3 against the Power 5 conferences. Again, they went 2-0 this past weekend with West Virginia and Oklahoma both winning. Let's move on to the ACC. The ACC went 5-3 this past weekend. Okay, the highlights were the Duke beat Northwestern. That I know that Northwestern's down, but they are really down. They went to Duke and lost 30-23. Duke has been horrible, and they were good enough to beat Northwestern. So I guess you could say good win for the ACC is maybe their worst team beat the worst team in the Big Ten. Louisville over UCF. Entertaining ball game, but that aside, huge win for Scott Satterfield and Louisville, defeating a good football team in UCF in exciting fashion. Okay, the lows for the ACC. Again, there are many this season and have been for the past 4 or 5 seasons. Miami was a touchdown favorite against Michigan State. They lost. Virginia Tech lost to West Virginia. No embarrassment for Virginia Tech in particular, but it's a big non-conference game against like-seeded teams, and Virginia Tech lost the game 27-21. Pitt lost to Central Michigan 44-41. That should not happen. So now the ACC is 22-12 outside the conference, 5-3 this past week. But against the Power 5, the ACC stands at 3-8. You still have the rest of the Notre Dame games, so it's Virginia Tech, North Carolina, Virginia, and Georgia Tech all take on Notre Dame. And then, of course, the big SEC weekend, the final weekend of the season. So the ACC not looking good again, despite 22-12. Again, group of 5 FCS teams, you're going to notch a ton of wins against them. 3-8 against the Power 5. On to the Big Ten. Up and down week for the Big Ten. Some really good wins, but also some disappointments, and going 7-4 in week 3. 23-7 now out of conference. 8-5 against the Power 5. That's pretty strong. Better than everybody else that we've talked about thus far. Penn State, of course, with a big win against Auburn. A big win in a certain sense that it's a good team from the SEC, but we'll see how good Auburn is against the SEC, and Penn State might just be the best team in the Big Ten. I think there's a collection of 5 teams in the Big Ten. Ohio State, because of talent, of course, not playing like it, but Penn State, Michigan, Michigan State. Then you've got Iowa and Wisconsin seem to be the top end of the Big Ten right now. But Penn State defeats Auburn. Good win for the Big Ten. Michigan State going to Miami. Again, big win for the Big Ten as what we expected to be a lower echelon team in the Big Ten defeats Miami, who, along with North Carolina, predicted to win the Coastal Division. Minnesota with a nice win at Colorado, 30-0 over the Buffs as an underdog. Ohio State with an unimpressive win against Tulsa. On the downside, Indiana blows a 14-0 lead at home, loses to Cincinnati. That could have been a big win for the conference, but Indiana loses. They had a chance to take the lead with about 3 minutes left in the game and fumbled inside the Cincinnati 10. So it's not a bad loss for the Big Ten because you take Indiana, who's probably the 6th or 7th best team in the league, and they lose to Cincinnati, who might be a top 10 team in the nation. So not a bad loss, but just a missed opportunity for the Big Ten. Likewise, Nebraska, Oklahoma. Can you imagine if the Huskers would have won on the road against number 4 Oklahoma, not number 4 in my rankings, of course, but number 4 in the nation. But the Huskers come up short, and we mentioned the Northwestern loss to Duke. That's an embarrassing look for the Big Ten. Now, again, 8-5 against the Power 5, 23-7 overall out of conference. And then finally, we go to the SEC, considered the best league in the country for quite some time, and they continue to prove it. The SEC was 7-3 in week 3. Auburn lost to Penn State. We talked about that. Vandy lost to Stanford. No harm there. Worst team in the SEC losing to Stanford. Not a big deal there. Mississippi State lost to Memphis, and they lost it in embarrassing fashion. They didn't cover a punt, and Memphis runs it for a touchdown with like 2 minutes left in the game, and so Mississippi State loses to Memphis. Nice win for Ole Miss over the weekend, winning 61-21 over a Tulane team that, of course, went to Norman and took the Sooners to the brink. The rest of them, very predictable wins in the group of 5, and a couple of SEC conference games that were pretty substantial, of course, in Alabama, Florida, Georgia, South Carolina, etc. Okay, we've got coming up Of course, the weekend of Thanksgiving with the games against the ACC coming up. Really the only mark against the SEC this past weekend, besides the Mississippi State loss to Memphis, was Kentucky barely defeating Chattanooga. Needed a late touchdown to win 28-23 in that one. But the SEC now 30-6 outside the conference. They're 6-4 against the Power 5, though, as they dropped a couple games with Auburn and Vandy losing. So 6-4 for the SEC actually places them percentage points behind the Big Ten against the Power 5. So that all taken into account, if I just went strictly by the numbers against the Power 5, then the Big Ten would be number one. If I strictly went by the percentages against the non-conference opponents, actually the Big 12 at 24-4 would be number one. But if you take everything into consideration and really look at the results, the SEC is number one. Number one conference in college football, the Big Ten a clear number two, the Big 12 at number three. It was difficult to make a call between the ACC and the Pac-12 last weekend, but considering UCLA goes down, Utah goes down, Arizona State goes down, Arizona goes down to an FCS team, and other losses in the Pac-12. The Pac-12 at 16-16 compared to the ACC's 22-12. Despite all the ACC issues, the ACC's at number 4. The Pac-12 is the worst conference in the Power 5. My thoughts on the Power 5, we've had almost all the non-conference results in, besides that SEC-ACC weekend coming up, the final weekend of the season. Your thoughts below about the conference rankings right here at the Voice of College Football. Like, comment down below, share these videos out on social media, and subscribe. Of course, lock it in here as we take your calls during our call-in shows and live streams each and every day right here at the Voice of College Football. You have a great day. We'll see you next time.